Hey everyone, today I want to do a short video and talk about those who are trying their very best to be obedient to the word and choose blessings, and yet somehow they are still feeling cursed. Shalom everybody, and welcome to Beit Tefillah. I read a lot of posts on Facebook lately where people who are really trying to do their best to be obedient to Torah, and yet they feel like they are really being tested or still being cursed. Once they leave idolatry, a lot of things can start happening to them that make them wonder, hey, what's going on? You know, I'm doing my very best to be obedient, to do the right thing. So why is Elohim letting all these things happen to me? What's going on in my life? This is just kind of chaotic. And this seems to be going around among a lot of people lately, and my family and I included. This has been a very rough past couple of weeks for us, as some of you know. But things are starting to get better, and we found blessings in spite of all of it. So yeah, there's a lot of strangeness going on, and I'm starting to get some emails from people the last few months, and they're trying their very best to walk in blessings, yet they still feel like they're being overrun with curses, maybe even more than before, as they still keep coming their way, and they're wondering why. Some will cite the following passage in Deuteronomy 11:26-28. See, I am setting before you today a blessing and a curse. The blessing when you obey the commands of Yahuwah your Elohim, which I command you today, and the curse if you do not obey the commands of Yahuwah your Elohim, but turn aside from the way which I command you today to go after other mighty ones which you have not known. So naturally, if they feel cursed, they feel like they are not being obedient in some way to the word. They feel like they're failing in some part, and you know, why wouldn't they really? And while we should always hold up what we do and what we believe to the word of Elohim and make sure that it matches, there's something else going on that I want to talk about. We live in a fallen, sinful world that has curses in it. It is just full of curses, and it's all due to sin. And those curses are not going to go away for us in this lifetime just because all of a sudden we are walking in obedience to the word. We're still going to have trials and tribulations in this life, living in this sinful, fallen world. After Adam and Eve sinned in the garden, Elohim told them the following is recorded in Genesis 3:16-19. To the woman he said, I greatly increase your sorrow and your conception, bring forth children in pain. And your desire is for your husband, and he does rule over you. And to the man he said, because you have listened to the voice of your wife and have eaten of the tree which I commanded you, saying, do not eat of it, cursed is the ground because of you. In toil you are to eat of it all the days of your life, and the ground shall bring forth thorns and thistles for you, and you shall eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your face you are to eat bread until you return to the ground, for out of it you were taken. For dust you are, and to dust you will return. Wow, it sounds like they had it pretty easy before sin came into the world and all these curses showed up, doesn't it? So do some of us think that just because we're walking in obedience today that our women will not have pain in childbirth, that the thorns and thistles that are on our property are just going to poof, disappear, and that we're no longer going to have to toil to make a living from this earth? Those kind of curses are going to remain in this world until the next age. Elohim did not tell Adam and Eve something like, look, once you get your act together and obey me, then I'm going to get rid of all them thorns and thistles and all that other bad stuff. No, that didn't happen. Even though we are walking in a sinful world and there's a lot of curses in there, sometimes Elohim can use different things to refine his people. He will bless us, but it doesn't mean right away. I mean, we would like things right away, and it's hard to be patient, especially living in a society where we don't have to wait for a lot of things. We cook in microwaves, we get next day shipping from Amazon, we can send emails all around the world in an instant. We don't have to wait for produce to grow in the garden if we just want to go to the market and buy it. You see where I'm going with this. But quite often with Elohim, we have to wait. And I want to talk about an example of that. Abram is thought to be about 85 years of age when the following transpired, as recorded in Genesis 15:2-6. And Abram said, Master Yahuwah, what would you give me, seeing I go childless, and the heir of my house is Eleazar of Damascus? And Abraham said, See, you have given me no seed, and see, one born in my house is my heir. And see, the word of Yahuwah came to him, saying, This one is not your heir, but he who comes from your own body is your heir. And he brought him outside and said, Look now toward the heavens, and count the stars, if you are able to count them. And he said to him, So are your seed. And he believed in Yahuwah, and he reckoned it to him for righteousness. And then a short time later, in Genesis 16:16, and Abram was 86 years old when Hagar bore Ishmael to Abram. Okay, so Abram was 86 at this point in time. Let's remember that. Now let's jump ahead 13 years in Genesis 17:1. And it came to be when Abraham was 99 years old that Yahuwah appeared to Abraham and said to him, I am El Shaddai, walk before me and be perfect. Abraham was 99 years old at this point in time. And then we read what happened next. Genesis 17:17-19. And Abraham fell on his face and laughed and said in his heart, Is a child born to a man who is 100 years old, or Sarah who is 90 years old to bear a child? And Abraham said to Elohim, Oh, let Ishmael live before you. And Elohim said, No, Sarah your wife is truly bearing a son to you, and you shall call his name Yitzhak. And I shall establish my covenant with him for an everlasting covenant, and with his seed after him. And then a couple of verses later we read in verse 21, But my covenant I establish with Yitzhak, whom Sarah is to bear to you, at this set time next year. Okay, so Abraham laughed to himself as his son Ishmael had been born to Hagar, but he had not yet had a child with his wife Sarah. Now Elohim was telling him that when he is 100 years old and his wife Sarah is 90, that he will have a child with her. Back in Genesis chapter 15:6, we heard that Elohim promised Abram an heir to which many nations would come from, and we read that Abraham believed in Yahuwah, and he reckoned it to him for righteousness. So I'm sure that Abraham probably thought that Ishmael was the promised one, not that he'd have to wait another 14 years, and especially at that age. So it had to be a little shocking to him, especially when Elohim told him this, as recorded in Genesis 17:19. No, Sarah your wife is truly bearing a son to you, and you shall call his name Yitzhak, and I shall establish my covenant with him for an everlasting covenant, and with his seed after him. So despite Abraham believing Elohim, and Elohim counting it as righteousness, Abram didn't get the heir that he was promised right away. He had to wait 15 more years, and by then he was a very old man. Imagine being told at the age of 85 years old, somewhere around there, that, don't worry, yeah, you're still going to have a kid, and then you're 100 years old going, boy, I don't know about that. I mean, and this, I don't know. Abraham had to be very patient, and he was also trusting in Elohim, but he still laughed when Elohim told him, no, you're going to have a son with your wife, because he had already waited 15 years. I'm sure he thought Ishmael was the one. Sometimes when Elohim says that we're going to receive blessings, we need to realize it's in the time frame that Elohim has established, which is not always immediately for us like some kind of instant reward or instant gratification like we're all so used to today living in this day and age. Let's look at another example. Remember when Moses sent out spies to spy out the land of Canaan, when Elohim said, okay, get ready, you're all going to go in there and take that land over. And all the men brought back a bad report because they were afraid, all except Joshua and Caleb, who said, no, let's go in there. We can do it. They brought back good reports. We can read about that in Numbers 14:6-9. And Joshua son of Nun and Caleb son of Jephunneh, who were among those who had spied out the land, tore their garments, and they spoke to all the congregation of the children of Israel, saying, the land we passed through to spy out is an exceedingly good land. If Yahuwah has delighted in us, then he shall bring us into this land and give it to us, a land which is flowing with milk and honey. Only do not rebel against Yahuwah, nor fear the people of the land, for they are our bread. Their defense is turned away from them, and Yahuwah is with us. Do not fear them. But anyway, the rest of them told Moses, no deal. We're not going to make it. They're too big and they're too scary and they're all huge and we're going to be dead. So they decided they weren't going to go in there. And then do you remember what Elohim said to them at that point in time? We can read about that in Numbers 14, 30 to 34, where Elohim said, "None of you, except Caleb son of Jephunneh and Yehoshua son of Nun, shall enter the land which I swore I would make you dwell in. But your little ones whom you said would become a prey I shall bring in, and they shall know the land which you have rejected. But as far as you, your carcasses are going to fall in this wilderness, and your sons shall be wanderers in this wilderness 40 years, and shall bear your whorings until your carcasses are consumed in the wilderness. According to the number of days in which you spied out the land, 40 days, a day for a year. A day for a year you are to bear your crookedness is 40 years, and you shall know my breaking off." So even though Joshua and Caleb gave good reports, they trusted Elohim, and they were ready to charge into this land, the rest of them said no. So Joshua and Caleb had to wander in the wilderness for 40 years before they got in, just the same as the rest of the ones who gave a bad report. Elohim didn't tell Joshua and Caleb, "Oh, you know what? You guys gave her a good report. You guys just go ahead and just waltz on in there, start living off the milk and honey and all the bread and fruit of the land, and then in 40 years I'll send the kids to all these other idiots, and they can go in there and join you, and y'all can have a good time." No, that's not what happened. They had to wander the wilderness as one group, as one body, for 40 years before Joshua and Caleb finally got to go in there with the children of all the rest who just dropped dead in the wilderness. Yahuwah always keeps his promises, but it's in his own time and for his own reasons, and it may not be exactly the time frame that we have in mind. You talk about something else. Remember when Achan hid the stuff under his tent that was pillaged from Jericho, and all of Israel was punished for it? Here's what Elohim had said to warn them. It's written in Joshua 6, 18 and 19. "And you, by all means, guard yourselves from that which is under the ban, lest you come under the ban, when you take of that which is under the ban, and make the camp of Israel a curse, and shall trouble it. But all the silver and gold and vessels of bronze and iron are set apart to Yahuwah. They go into the treasury of Yahuwah." So just this one guy named Achan defies Elohim and takes what was under the ban, some gold and some other stuff, and hides it under his tent. But it wasn't just that one man who was cursed. Elohim told Joshua, as we read in Joshua 7, 11 to 12, "Yisrael has sinned, and they have also transgressed my covenant which I commanded them. And they have even taken some of that which is under the ban, and have both stolen and deceived, and also put it among their own goods. And the sons of Yisrael shall not be able to stand before their enemies. They are going to turn their backs before their enemies, for they have become accursed. I am not with you any more, unless you destroy that which is under the ban from your midst." So Elohim said Yisrael had sinned, plural. The whole camp, all the children of Israel had sinned because of this one guy. And he said he wasn't going to be with them anymore until they destroyed the evil from their midst. The one who had done wrong, had sinned and defied Elohim, and put that stuff that was under the ban under his tent. Once we come into covenant with Elohim, we become Yisrael and part of one body and part of one family. But of course, there's a lot of people out there today as we're trying to get this figured out, as we're in the sifter and we're, in the dispersion, and some people are doing things a little bit different here and a little bit different there, and we are not moving as one body. Not yet. But we will in the next life, when we have the Torah written on our hearts and we are all walking according to Elohim's word in unison, moving as one. Elohim said the following is recorded in Isaiah 46, 9 to 10. "Remember the former events of old, for I am El, and there is no one else. Elohim, and there is no one like me, declaring the end from the beginning." Declaring the end from the beginning. When Elohim first brought the children of Israel out of Egypt, they heard his voice. He personally led them, right? They saw a pillar of fire at night and a pillar of smoke during the day. He personally led them. Then after some time, the people, they didn't want to hear his voice anymore. They told Moses, "Hey, you go speak to him and then come back and tell us what he said, because we're going to die because of hearing this voice." Then they stopped over time. After they got in the land, they stopped trusting him. They forgot his name. They let go of his Torah, and they fell into idolatry. Now here at the end, we are finding Elohim's Torah. We seek his ways. We seek his name and are coming out of idolatry, and we yearn to hear the voice of our Elohim and have him lead us as one people. The end from the beginning. Let me use an analogy. Let's say you wanted to join a football team, but you hated wearing all of that gear and the shoulder pads and the helmets. You didn't want to go through all that. It was all hot and sweaty and it was heavy. And you didn't want to be running around the field and doing all those practices. And you didn't want to get hit on the field by anybody. So you just kind of hung back there and didn't do any of that. Well, it's not going to take long for the coach to cut you from the team, right? As you weren't serious about committing yourself to football. Some people come out of idolatry and a lot of things happen to them. A lot of bad things happen. It gets tough, it gets hard, and they liked it when their life was a little cushier, and so they run right back into idolatry. Well, it doesn't sound like they were very committed to Elohim and his word and obeying it no matter what, because they just easily ran right back into idolatry. So Elohim set up a test, and they failed the test. Plain and simple. That's pretty easy to see. If life starts to get hard, will you obey Elohim no matter what? We need to remember that Elohim is always going to be refining his people. Zechariah 13:9. And I shall bring the third into fire and refine them as silver is refined and try them as gold is tried. They shall call on my name and I shall answer them. I shall say, this is my people, while they say, Yahuwah is my Elohim. You know, there's another part in the Torah that speaks of choosing blessing and curses that I'd like to go over. It's in Deuteronomy 30, verse 19, where Elohim says, I have called the heavens and the earth as witnesses today against you. I have set before you life and death, the blessing and the curse. Therefore you shall choose life, so that you live, both you and your seed. Well, let's think about it like this. If we're alive today and our children are alive today, we're already living. We already have life. So it sounds to me like in this verse, he's talking about having life in the next age. Okay, and we can hear that in the very next verse in Deuteronomy 30:20. To love Yahuwah your Elohim, to obey his voice and to cling to him, for he is your life and the length of your days, to dwell in the land which Yahuwah swore to your fathers, to Abraham, to Yitzhak, and to Jacob, to give them. To dwell in the land which Yahuwah swore to your fathers. So once Elohim takes us from under the dirt and puts us back on top of the dirt to live and to serve him for eternity, we will dwell in the land that Elohim promised to our fathers. I imagine that all the curses are going to be taken care of by then. Until then, we must not only be obedient, but we must try to be patient and trust in Elohim. We may feel afflicted many times by all the things that go wrong in our lives, but we need to remember this, as recorded in Isaiah 48:10. See, I have refined you, but not as silver. I have chosen you in the furnace of affliction. Well, I hope this video blessed you. I hope it answered some of these questions that some of these people have been asking me. It was kind of a refreshing video to put together since we've been going through quite a bit ourselves lately. And that's Elohim's plan. We're all in his plan, and he is watching out for us. He is refining his people. So I'd like to say shalom and give a shout out to all of those scattered worldwide in dispersion all around the earth who are in covenant and who are truly Yisrael. Everybody be blessed and have a wonderful day.